everybody, this is a very important public service announcement from Ed Squire and Evan Herrman, my guest. We're recording this after we actually did the podcast, and for a very important reason. The way this podcast went was not only, it was amazing, but we covered just a wide variety. It's a huge landscape of topics that I think you're going to find interesting. But I think that there's going to be something along the way that you're not going to want to miss that's after about halfway. So my guest, Evan Herrman, decided, and I agree with him, we should make a little public service announcement here at the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. Because one of the most touching, most life-changing moments for a listener would probably come at the end. And we don't want you to miss that just because of the beginning, if it's not as 100% content that you'd want. Because we talk about finances, we talk about cultural things, and then we get into...
We even got into some politics and these kinds of things.
Right, yeah.
Which is good, it's good.
But it all relates to the end story. So we have the overarching narrative, and then we also have the most impactful stuff at the very end and how it all ties it together. So you're not going to want to miss a second of the episode, because if you jump forward, you're going to miss how it all applies. And if you only stop at the beginning, you're going to miss the most important thing.
I just want to say this, Evan, the stories that you shared in those moments are very, very powerful, and it's going to be life-changing for a lot of people. So I'm glad you mentioned this and that we did this public service announcement at the very beginning, because this is a very good episode. I appreciate it. So with that,
enjoy the show.
Enjoy the show. Hey everyone, welcome to the Visible Kindness Podcast. I'm your host, Ed Squire. Today we have Evan Herrman from Tulsa, Oklahoma on the episode, and I'm very excited to speak with this gentleman. We met on social media, and he's a fellow podcaster like myself. The name of his podcast is The Whole Person Podcast. That really got my attention. And it's about being whole and healed by living a life of significance in the areas that matter most. And he lists those areas as being faith, family, finances, friendship, fitness, and fun. There's a lot of F's in there. And we're going to get into what he means by all of that. But it certainly caught my attention for visible kindness. Evan is also he's a real estate agent, which is interesting. I want to talk to him a little bit about what got him into that and what's the real estate economy doing in Tulsa for him. But what I love about him also is he's a coach, and it's an area that I've been wanting to get into recently, and I love where he's heading with his coaching program as well. He loves to encourage others to think more in depth about their lives and their circumstances, so they can find healing and truth that unlocks a peace, freedom, and growth that comes with knowing they're worthy enough to have it and capable enough to take actions. I mean, that's totally all about visible kindness. I love it. Now, Evan is also a speaker, and he's a fantastic speaker. As a matter of fact, I've listened to many of his podcasts, and he's had some excellent opportunities to speak in front of crowds. And when he does so, here's what he says. When I stand in front of people to speak, I come from a place of vulnerability about my failures, my struggles, my hurts, success, and the life lessons that have come from them all. So I'm really excited to have Evan on my program today. And Evan, I really appreciate you coming on the show and being with us on Visible Kindness. And I'm really excited to have a conversation with you. And how are you doing today, my friend?
Ed, I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
You're a family man is more than anything. You love your family, and so you have a wife. And how many kids do you have? I looked at some of your content on your Facebook, and I love that you love your family. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I've been married for 11 years as of this episode. I have 3 boys and 2 angel babies. One is a girl. We don't know the gender of the other. So an angel baby is basically that a pregnancy that you guys that someone has gone through, but the child did not make it typically past birth, or a child that you had that is no longer with us. And so my wife and I, we had a premature stillborn daughter. And then our other angel baby, passed away probably about 12 to 15 weeks in the pregnancy. So that would be a miscarriage, basically.
I'm really sorry, to hear that. And but I love how you recognize them as being a part of your family, as they are. And this is my belief. And you're going to say that when you get to heaven, anyways.
Exactly.
Why would you not count them in your life right now? My mother had many miscarriages until both my sister and I made it. And all of us we talk about that all the time. And we're excited to see our brothers and sisters when we get to heaven. And I like that. Well, good for you. Angel babies. I think that's beautiful. So you're in real estate in Tulsa. What's real estate like in Oklahoma right now?
Pretty similar to a lot of other places in terms of if you're selling, you're probably going to get a really great offer. And it will sell very quickly. Average day on market is like 26 days here, which is really phenomenal, which means that you're typically getting an offer day 1, day 2. If you're buying, it's not so great. It's much more expensive, and you're competing against 10 to 15 offers. So it's not a healthy market. It's very unbalanced at the moment. And that's due to COVID. That's due to a lot of other issues going on in the country as well.
Yeah, I know. I was watching some of the some of the economic news last night, and nobody knows ultimately what is going to happen with everything that's going on. So
I can tell you what's going to happen.
Please.
Yeah, our dollar's going to go bankrupt. Like, there's not been one fiat currency, one paper currency that has ever lasted the test of time, ever. And what happens is inflation through printing and spending money that does not exist, which we're doing in leaps and bounds right now in our country. And so eventually our money is going to go to zero. And so the way to hedge yourself against that is to have assets that hold value. I think we are going to move into cryptocurrency. In which specific one, I don't know. I mean, right now there's tons of them. But which one will be universal at some point? I don't know. I doubt it even exists at this point. But what you want to do is you want to find storage of value. So for me, it's silver, it's gold, it's property, it's land, it's physical assets that can hold wealth versus trying to put money in savings. Because, which is funny is because I've invested money into cryptocurrency and I've probably lost about $1,000 to $2,000 right now. I'm sure it'll rebound. Later this year, but I've actually lost less in crypto than if I just had it in savings because of appreciated value. Yeah.
That's interesting. And, I tend to agree with you as well. The big question mark is the fact that we're in this unknown territory financially and economically and culturally that,
can I correct you real quick?
Yeah.
It's unknown because people haven't educated themselves on history. So it's unknown because we haven't studied it, but it isn't unknown to history. So if we go back and look at times past and civilizations past, we can look at the blueprints of what they've done wrong and how we're repeating it and what happened to them and what will happen to us.
Yeah, that's, I would agree with you. And I'm not a real smart financial person. I like to read a lot, watch a lot. No, but you have you have some financial intelligence there, and I've watched or listened to some of your podcast episodes and some of the excellent guests you've had on that are also very, very well experienced. And I guess when I say the unknown parts of it is that I'm not sure if this very combination of everything that we have combined together has happened before. With in any society that has fiat currency, I may be wrong. I'm saying it hesitantly because when I think of that list of things, right, with just a whole bucket of issues that we're dealing with, not only economically but socially and it's also globally. We've never had a global economic system that is as connected as we are today. And I mean technically as well as financially, that's the part that we don't know. And in 2008, 2009, it took everybody by surprise. Although it took people by surprise, you're right. What happened in 2008, 2009 wasn't new. That sort of thing was not new. So it'll be interesting, and I agree with you on all points you made there as well. That at some point, let's just look at Argentina. Not that long ago,
Argentina, Venezuela, Cuba.
Yeah,
you can even look at the U.S. when we back in the colonial times before we won the war against England. When we were using colonial dollars, we printed those like crazy to help pay soldiers and to buy food. But inflation happened. It became worthless, that paper. And then that's why there was regulation set after that on being backed by gold.
Do you think that, I had no idea we go in this direction.
This was not planned at all, anyone. Just FYI.
But it's good because it really does, it ties into, your mission, right? Of the things that matter. And, which is all of the faith, family, finances. What am I missing, Evan?
Faith, family, finances, friendship, fitness, and fun.
Yeah. So this really is an important topic when it comes to your mission. So I'm excited to go in that direction for a bit as well. So what's going to be interesting is I think there's a false sense of security for sure with the economic situation that it is. And when the big crash happened at the beginning of this year, I thought, holy cow, here it comes. And then all of a sudden, the stock market's booming, everything's booming, and the inflation is happening, and it's big time happening.
Oh yeah, it's like 5% almost in different areas.
That's right. And
even though the economics in Washington is saying, oh, it's 3, 4, 5, no. That's bull. Like literally it costs me a little over $1 more now to fill up with gas. So it's about 30% more just in gas. Lumber is about 30% more as well.
Yeah. And now it's hitting the grocery stores.
Yeah.
And what I find
food's gone up to about 25%. Yeah.
And I remember growing up in in the 70s when inflation was happening. We had some pretty serious situations with the economy at that time, and literally the gas pumps were empty and people were lining up for gas and whatnot. This is much different than back then. But with the novice level of experience I have in these things, I try to stay up to date and read and try to understand as best I can. And I thought, I was surprised that when the stock market tanked and it came back up and everything's going really strong. And you keep hearing a lot of economists say, well, it's the great experiment, right? Have you heard that term? It's the great experiment. We don't know what's going to happen. But you're right. I do agree with you in the sense that, well, we do know what's going to happen because this is nothing new in the sense of, some very specific things that are happening in our economy with printing money and devaluing the value of it and the inflation. But it's all that interconnectedness. And what was weird in 2008, just the massive bailouts that the government said that we need to do. And then you and I have never talked about this. And I really talk about these things on my show because I usually avoid politics or religion and these things, right?
We're going to get in that with me.
I'm all right with it. But we, I was thinking about the fallout of 2008, 2009. That took us by surprise. And I thought, just in my limited knowledge, I thought, why are we bailing out these massive companies when a good portion, I don't know how much, but it went to the CEOs in bonuses and payouts to their executives. And the very statement that we need to have them functioning so it doesn't take down the entire global economy.
Right.
And I'm like, I didn't agree with that. I think
what we needed is them to go bankrupt and another company to buy them.
That's what I think too. Because if you I don't know if this is the best analogy, but I mean, when I'm in debt and I'm going down, 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 the best thing to do is not lend me more money. The best thing to do is teach me how to get out of that. If that means declaring bankruptcy, if that means selling my house, if that means living in my car for a few months. But when you're out of money, you're out of money. You have to.
And look at these companies that received huge bailouts. Are they existent? Some of them, but not a lot of them.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
I mean, you look at these major car industries that have had to sell off to other brands, because even then, after the bailout, and it was done in the name of preserving jobs. But again, what we're going through right now in our society is a false sense of morality, which means that we're claiming what we should do is moral, when in reality, it's the exact opposite of moral. It's a fake moral argument. And biblically speaking, you would call that a false prophet. And so we have a lot of false prophets out there trying to act more holier than thou, like this is the correct way, and trying to use moral reasoning and emotional reasoning, when in reality, it's wrong, unethical, and it's not, I don't want to say strategic. It's not, it's based off of emotion versus logic. And so that's one of the big issues in our society right now.
And that is something that I find frustrating, because I agree with you. And the next question is, how do we change it? Right? It just seems like we are destined to crash in more ways than one. I don't mean just financial crash. That is also, I guess, another unknown that I think of when I use that term. We don't know what's going to happen, and we don't know when either. And I think you tell me, but from what I understand, this thing could crack at any moment. I mean, literally,
it legitimately could. Yeah, I mean,
or it could be. Some people say it could be, a couple of years or something too. Which again, gives us a false sense of security, because every month that goes by, I think we're thinking, it's okay, things are going great. But I think at some point, right, this is just my uneducated guess, just from what I'm learning, is that it is inevitable at some point here.
Well, especially if you believe scripture, because at one point there will be a one world government and there will be a one world currency. It's talked about that in Revelation. That's part of the Antichrist system. Yeah,
it's whatever you believe about that, it's pretty hard to ignore what's happening.
No, exactly. No,
it's happening.
It over 2,000 years ago, and we are literally seeing it happen right now.
That's this is great, because so I want to talk more about what you do. And your passion for this, because what we're talking about right now is in direct line with your mission and your passion
about personal growth and being self-aware.
Yes,
which is my mission. And so how we got off on this tangent is because you need to understand what's going on around the world and what that means economically and what it means for your future. Because if you don't plan for your future now, you won't have one. And so the best thing I can do is plan for that now and use delayed gratification, And so for me, what I've had to learn through a lot of pain is that change doesn't happen quickly in my life, in terms of I go from one spot to another very quickly. It's been a process of so many years, and it's little stepping stones, little by little. I just started investing this year. I'm 33. I finally had money to invest. And so, I started learning about investing probably back in 2020, looking at investing, looking at what's going on around the world. Because, before I just didn't have the money, so I didn't study it. But once I started getting a little extra cash flow, I was like, okay, now I need to study more about the economics of the world. And while I knew a little bit, I really dove in deep. And so depending on where you're at in your life will determine what you need to focus on. And so, I interviewed Mark Cuban once for 5 minutes, and I asked him, how does he live a balanced life? And he said, because I lived out of balance for so long. And so, my show, the Whole Person Podcast, is about learning how to live a life that is balanced in faith, family, finances, friendship, fitness, and fun. But what I'm realizing is you can't juggle all that at once. Sometimes I have to be a little more out of balance in one area so that it better affects all the other areas. So, one of the things right now in my life that I'm living out of balance in is paying a little bit more attention to my health. And so I'm living more out of balance in that area, giving more time, energy, focus, and attention to that. But it's going to help my family. It's going to help the longevity of my faith, my walk with God. It's going to help my finances because I'm not going to have to go to the ER and be sick and do all these things. It's going to help my friendships because I'm going to be around and I'm going to be able to be invested, and I'm going to have more fun because I'll be active and I won't be sick. So it affects those areas. And so knowing how to give and take in between these areas, ultimately you get to live out a more rounded life. And so financially, I realize, if I want to protect my family, now that I have money, this is an area that I need to focus on financially. And now I'm currently on my health kick because right now I don't have extra money. Last year I did. And so I do these things, ebbs and flows when they come in seasons, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think also we can only do so much at one time, but we can also only do what we've been enlightened to do, in a sense that we become aware of, right? So self-awareness that you mentioned is really important. It's hard to look after your body if you're just not self-aware, if you understand the impact of that. Or, I think timing in life is interesting. For like you and I are both Bible-believing Christians, so that has a huge impact on everything.
Right.
Everything that happens in our lives happens for a reason in God's timing. He knew from the beginning from the end. I don't pretend to, no, that's not the right word. I have no problem not knowing why things happen and why God does certain things. I'm perfectly comfortable with that because you know what? I don't know why and how my phone works. I have as much faith in my phone as I do in my God. And that's what I say to people sometimes, why does God do this? Or how can a loving God do that? Well, I don't have the answer for everything, but I don't have the answer for everything in my phone either. Do you? And we don't. But we can only be responsible and take action on the things that we become alive to, become aware of. And, it's my heart goes out to people that either may not be prepared or even bigger, that don't know the Lord, right? So I know that if everything falls apart, for me, I know that God is going to look after me, and what that looks like, I don't even need to know what that looks like. I need to take responsibility for myself.
It might not even be the way you want.
No, it may not be. But I think once when that happens, I mean, I can say this from experience. Where my life is right now is not what I wanted. Nothing is what I wanted.
Right. But
I've never been happier. I've never been more at peace. I don't think I ever would have arrived at this place mentally, physically, and emotionally. Well, physically is a different thing, but emotionally and spiritually, I wouldn't give up just how much I've come to know and love the Lord, and that relationship I have with Him is worth more than anything. I'd be willing to give up everything to have that. I would have said that 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I was making six figures, and I just believed God was blessing me because, it was just blind, very immature understanding of what God was really doing in my life and where He was taking me. And at one point, it all ended, and that was in 2016. And I had to come to a place where, when people used to ask me what I did for a living, I used to tell them I was a highly niche consultant for Fortune 500 companies and global companies in the United States, Canada, and Europe. And I used to consult with companies like the Boeing Corporation, Pepsi-Cola Global, Sanofi Aventis in Paris. And you know what? I used to say that with a certain amount of pride and identity because, wow, that sounds impressive. And for me, there was such a hole in my heart that I needed to have you think something impressive of me. My value came from what I did and what I thought people thought about me. You know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. And so when all that went away and I had to rediscover myself and find out what is truth in my life, what is important in my life, and where's my identity. And that's what came out of Me Too, What Now? The tagline is find yourself, live yourself, give yourself. It's all about understanding your identity, healing and becoming a whole person. Then, a lot of faith comes into that, and that's where healing comes in. And, so now I have a different perspective on, money and finance, my career, my health. And, it just, I'm agreeing with you as you mentioned, you become more aware of what you need to do with your health. So anyway, so this really ties into your coaching program. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're doing with that and how that's going for you?
Yeah. So what I do and the way I work with people is we find out where they're struggling at in life, what they're going through, what they need help with, what they want help with, and help them, if they don't know what those areas are, self-discover them versus tell them, and then help them find solutions without telling them. You have to ask questions, and a lot of questions. And when they find the answer, they buy into it. And the other aspect in our coaching that I want everyone to walk away with is learning how to love themselves through the process of change, because that's something that I struggled with. I wasn't able to grow personally or change personally to become the high productive person that I wanted to be until I started learning how to love myself first. And it was at that moment that an explosion of growth happened, and it changed my life. I've had a lot of growth before that, but when I started seeing fruit of that growth is when I started learning how to love myself, because I could never be the Evan Herrman that I wanted to be in the future, because that guy loved himself. But until I learned how to love myself now, I couldn't be that guy. And not only that, but my future self was also an idol, because that's how I should have been made. That's what I want to be. I wasn't thinking, like, ideally I wanted to be like Jesus, but really I wanted to be like the Evan Herrman I conjured up in my mind. So not only was that idol, but it was also an idol towards God, but it was also self-hatred.
When you say you want to be like Jesus, and I think of Peter, and I think of all the disciples, how they were before the book of Acts when he left, and how they were afterwards. And each one of them just changed radically in that time. And I think of Peter, each one of us has our own individuality. The way you would be like Jesus would be very different than me, because we all have different personalities. But when you, and the Bible says we're to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. And I was talking about this in my last episode where, what does that look like? How can you, if you don't love yourself, how does that reflect on loving your neighbors? Right. I think a lot of us, I think our ability to love our neighbors and have an impact is impeded by the level of self-compassion we have for ourselves. It doesn't mean you can't do nice things, doesn't mean you can't be kind, doesn't mean you can't love them. But if you're not doing it out of the love you have for yourself, it'll look way different. So,
right. Well, think about this, okay? And I'm going to get very poignant and somewhat political here, okay? We have a woke crowd in our society that stands up for injustice. Well, I shouldn't say stands up for justice, so-called injustice, different rights, and, acceptance. But yet these are also the individuals that also are the most hatred and most destructive in our society. So that which they profess to be against, meaning that, we're against you because you're this, it's actually a mirror to who they are. Because if they were really about empathy, if they were really about change, if they were really about those things, they'd come from a place of understanding versus a place of accusation and hatred, which also means that they themselves aren't okay with where they're at in their life.
I totally agree. And we need to hear that more.
And here's the other thing, coming from that opposite side, it is very frustrating. Yeah, I politically disagree with a lot of that. And then there's a time to battle, and then there's a time to give compassion. And you have to discern in the moments which ones those are. Because everybody's just wanting to go to battle. Am I the medic or am I the soldier right now?
Kind of got to be a little bit of both right now.
You have to be. You have to be.
So what happened to you? Because you've obviously had a transformation here of self-compassion. And I know for me, when it comes to what's happening politically and culturally, I'm Canadian, and I've lived here since 2003, so a long time. But I'm
really sorry for what's going on in your country right now.
Well, yeah. So hold on to that for a second. When I first moved here, it was totally different, right? It was always like, and it was a certain amount of pride, but to me, it was unhealthy pride. And I still say that to my Canadian friends sometimes whenever there's any conversation that comes across social media where, in any way, shape, or form, how Canada is better than the US or whatever. And, I had a military service veteran of mine when I posted something about the differences between Canada and the US. And he was smart. He didn't just post stuff online to refute what I had said. He literally got in touch with me right away personally and said, "Hey, I just want you to know something. There may be something about the US that you don't understand." And he shared some things with me from not only a military aspect, but also from a historical aspect for this country. Because we were talking about the differences in our national anthems, right? And Canadians like to say that, our anthem is a prayer. And it is. It is a prayer. It's a prayer to God. It is a prayer. And American and Canadians tend to, I'm not saying all Canadians, but Canadians tend to say the Americans' national anthem is a declaration of war. It's all about war. And so that was the nature of the post. And then when Travis reached out to me, he let me know more about the U.S. anthem than I ever knew. Yeah. And I think we need to have more of a respect for each other and understand where we come from, for one thing. But Canada's having a lot of problems right now on a moral level. Yeah. Never mind economic and the other social things that are happening. But it's
what's happening not just in Canada.
I'm not in a hurry to go back there. I can tell you that.
Well, what's going on now more than ever? It's not so much Democrat versus Republican. It's becoming good versus evil, disguised in politics. And I'm not saying one side of the political system is right and the other one isn't.
Right.
But it's trying to disguise itself in the political system. But we are in a war against good and evil. We always have been, and we always will be. We wrestle not with flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities, rulers of darkness of this age. This is going to get funny, okay? I had a friend who's like, Evan, he goes, I can't believe in Christianity or Jesus. And I said, why is that? He goes, because Christians are so narrow-minded that their way can only be the right way. It's like, well, I kind of hear what you're saying. There's a lot of different fractions that believe their way is only the right way. Why are you saying this? Was my question. He goes, because I believe in aliens. And if Christians can't believe aliens exist, then they're not open-minded enough. Therefore, I can't believe in Christ. You know what my answer was to my friend? I said, well, you're in luck. I believe in aliens. And he goes, what? You do? And I said, yeah, but I don't believe in them the same way you do. He goes, what do you mean? I said, you believe in extraterrestrial, right? He goes, well, yeah. I said, I don't believe in extraterrestrial. I believe in interterrestrial. And he goes, what do you mean? Interdimension. Spiritual interdimensions. So what you would call an alien, I would call a spirit or a demon. And they're interdimensional terrestrial or celestial beings that aren't of this world that can flow in between different dimensions. And it hit him like a ton of bricks. Like, oh my gosh, this is a reality. Like, this is a possibility. I said, and they're only disguised as extraterrestrial because they don't want you to know the truth. And it floored him. It floored him that one, I would admit that there's aliens. And then two, that I could intellectually talk to him about it.
See, and I think that's missing a lot in Christendom. I was talking about this again on my last podcast. I don't even like telling people I'm a Christian because it just puts you in this box, mm-hmm. right, of what people think you're like, and I think we need to be more prepared to have conversations like this, and I think we need to be more open-minded. I've had, like, for me, I have no problem having conversations about quantum physics and the theories that lie beyond what we can test. And it really, we're pushing into the boundaries that God has allowed us to see. And same with space as well, where, we will never figure God out. But
as the reality is, people try to put God in a box, which is space, time, and matter. But God, being the creator of all things, cannot operate in space, time, or matter. He has to be outside of those things. And that's the only thing we have to measure by.
Well, and that's, it goes back to my comment at the beginning of the show, is that I'm comfortable not knowing everything about God because there's if there is a supreme being out there,
and we knew everything about them, then they're not that supreme.
Then they're not a supreme being, right? We have to get off of our pride and come to a place where we're okay with not knowing everything and still believing in it, because we still do in other areas of our life. And I always use the phone. Look, we're doing this podcast. I don't know how all this thing works. I'm seeing you on video. We're talking on this thing. I'm going to upload it. I don't know how all that works. I just know it does. I have total faith in it. And it's the same with God. And the more I use this technology, the more I become familiar with it and understand it. And the more I spend time with God, the exact same thing happens. And, I like what you're saying as well, because this is so much more than just, hey, we're having inflation and we need to invest in crypto and other assets that are, longstanding, and we're having cultural issues and political issues. It's all global and all this stuff. And I've just in the last few weeks, Evan, I've just come to the point where, very seldom do I talk about the Lord. And, I was asking my sister the other day, yes, I'm missing something in everything that I'm doing, right? I mean, people love me too. What now? They love Visible Kindness. They love my videos, all this stuff that I'm doing. I'm starting a coaching program. It's all great. But the reality is God is missing in all of that. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because if he's called me to do it that way, then great. But if I'm feeling unsettled, like you were just talking about your health, there's something I need to do. And the reality is, without him being in my life, there's very specific points in my life where when I was 13, I asked him to come into my life, and he did. I cannot deny that happened. Well, I backslid for 4 decades, but all those years, I knew he was with me. I couldn't, there was no denying that. There was nothing I could prove, but I found myself on a regular basis asking him to please leave. All the shenanigans I was up to, I was saying, God, you have to be here. I mean, you have to watch what I'm doing. Can you just leave me? Can you just leave me alone for a while? And I just sensed him saying back to me, no. As a matter of fact, I sensed him saying, in a kind way, I felt him saying, when are you going to serve me? And that is not something you want to hear when you're up to no good. And I would say to him, I can't yet. I just knew that I would not do it.
Yeah.
Right. I was a prodigal out there doing prodigal things, and I just knew that it's just not going to happen right now. And I was really in fear for my life in a sense, because I'm like, oh, I wouldn't want to die in this particular state of mind. Yeah. Would I have gone to heaven? Yeah, probably. But what a sad way to go when you're out in left field as a prodigal. And then in 2012, in August, on the 24th exactly, it was my dark night of the soul, and I said, God, where are you in my life anyway? What is happening?
Can I segue?
Yeah.
Or I'm sorry, actually, you were telling your story. I'll segue into my story after you finish.
Sure. Okay. So the reality was, I just had a knockdown drag out with him, and I said, God, where are you? I mean, where the hell are you in my life? And you're looking at, all the hairs on my head, you feed the birds and the trees, like, where are you in my life? And looking back now, I know that he was sitting there, and if I could hear him speak, I'm sure he would have said, you know what, Ed, I've just been waiting for you to ask me.
Yeah.
Because never in decades did I say, God, where are you in my life? Help me. And if all these things in the Bible, all these promises, no condemnation for those that are in Christ, you lead me beside still waters, you make me lie down in the green pastures. Where's that for me? And until we ask, this is the interesting thing. This is what I tell people when it comes to faith and Christianity. I don't have to prove to you what the Bible says. I mean, I can tell you what I believe and whatnot, but the best advice I give to people is, you know what? Ask him. If he's really the God of the universe, and if he's the God over all other gods, don't you think he's big enough that he can actually answer your question and intervene, and he can do it on his own? I'm a seed planter. I'm not the person to open your eyes, but you ask and he'll find out. All of that to say, I'm shifting my content because, like you said, we're in a war between good and evil. There's nothing else. And I never thought about the great white throne judgment before, where we stand before God, and this is people that are saved, and we're judged according to our works, not for salvation, but for our works. And I thought, what am I doing all of this for? Do I want to go back to being a high-end consultant and making six figures? Yeah, money is great, but money used to be everything. Now it's like people need to hear from the real God. And the only way that's going to happen is through our testimony and through his blood. And so I'm starting to shift my content into that direction, because what else am I doing it for? Why am I doing all this? To make money or to really change lives? Hey, it's great to find yourself, but who is that person?
Yeah.
So go ahead. Love to hear what you have to say.
So I love you sharing your story, and I want to hopefully bring this a little home for some of the listeners. Everything that we talked about, there's an overarching theme, which is personal growth, self-development, in specific areas at specific times. Pay attention, be self-aware, know what's going on. And through all this, like, God will help you develop these areas, especially when you're surrendered to him as well. But I want to get to some of the hard questions that people have, which is, why do good things happen to bad people? Or no, why do bad things happen
yeah, and that,
yeah,
for sure.
Why can Jeff Bezos shoot a dick up in space and have billions of dollars? Seriously, that's
when I saw that, I was like, okay, what? Wait a minute.
I think everyone saw that and was like, huh? Oh man! But seriously, and it's a double entendre, because a lot of people call him a dick, and he shot one up in space. So it's just funny. Yes, I'm a real Christian. Anyway, so how?
See, right there. That's the thing, Evan. Right there. That's the thing. you're being real, and that's, that's a big part of what our walk is like. You're not perfect. I'm not perfect. God knows your heart. And I just want to be real with people, and God help me every day to become a better person. We're in the process. So you're doing just fine.
Thanks. So, but the thing is, why do bad things happen to good people? What if I told you we're not good? Because we're not. The Bible says all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. No man can come to the Father except through his Son, Jesus. So not even the best things about me are good enough to qualify me for salvation, which is why we needed salvation, in that we can depend on his righteousness and not my works.
And that is a hard concept to understand, my friend.
It is. And so the thing is then we understand, okay, I'm not deserving of anything. And then the other thing is, scripture also says we have an enemy, a devourer, the one who is like a lion who searches out people to steal, to kill, and destroy. But I have come life to give liberty and to give it more abundantly. So we got to understand that the crap and the bad things that happen aren't of God. And what there is good does come from God. And have this understanding that God is good no matter what. And that our understanding.
And God is just too. That's the hard part, right? It's like a police officer in a good sense. I'm not talking about the controversy with whatever police. Right. I'm talking about, a police officer is there to serve and protect, and part of that serving is applying justice where it's needed. It doesn't mean they don't like you or don't love you. That that's the part of God that people don't understand, is that if he's such a good God, why does he do this? Because he's just as well. It's like the judicial system we live in, right? There's bad things have to happen to bad people. Right?
But the other thing too is people look like, oh, well, why would God if he loves us, why would he send people to hell? He doesn't send people to hell. He gives them over to their depraved minds and their own actions in refusal of relationship with him. And they themselves choose eternity absent from God based off of their actions. God doesn't send anyone to hell. He gave everyone the opportunity for salvation. But I want to share why this is very specific, at least for me as well. I grew up in the church. God saved me from being an alcoholic. God saved me from being a drug addicted person. God saved me from being, how do I put this? Sexually assaulted. God saved me from all these things because I never had to go through it. I never had to go through it. He didn't deliver me when I was going through those things, but he prevented it because I've been walking with him my entire life.
See, I like this because here you and I are. We have to do another episode at some point because I'm just getting to know you, and I'd love to do this. Don't lose your place. I don't want what I'm about to say for you to lose your train of thought. But I'm looking at you and me, and that didn't happen for me. All those things that God spared you from and protected you from, none of those happened. So here we are, and that's why I carried a chip on my shoulder until 2012. Okay, God, what is up? Why? And then I came to understand why. We can talk about that later, but the reality is there's no difference between you and me at all. And I didn't do anything to deserve it. And you didn't do anything to deserve what you got, right? This is the beauty of it. And when we understand that God is good and he loves, now what he's going to do is all things, he takes all things in our lives and he makes all things beautiful in his time. And then all things, he will use all things for his glory in our lives. So here we are, two opposite ends of the spectrum here, you and I, and both grateful for what he has done. So continue.
So I've had many grief-filled moments in my life. I've had moments that I was like, God, where the hell are you? I've questioned his existence. I've questioned if he's good. My life hasn't been roses. Since 2008, on average, this year's been pretty good. but on average, I've lost one close person in my life every single year since 2008. I've lost 2 children. I've lost so many friends, multiple mentors. I've had 3 people die in front of me, 1 guy die in my arms. I am well acquainted with grief and death. The one that hurt the most was 2013 when my premature daughter died. And when she was born, she wasn't born alive, but we got to keep her body for about 7 hours. They drugged my wife so much so that she wouldn't have to feel anything because they wanted her to be able to kind of escape the experience. But that made her really sleepy for the majority of the day. So I was alone the majority of the day while my wife would come in and out of being awake, holding my daughter's dead body for 7 hours by myself. And at 7:34, the nurse walks into the room and says, "Mr. Herrman, it is now time for us to take her body away." And I give her body up and I hand her over. The pain, the desperation, the anxiety, life itself felt like it was being sucked right out of me, knowing I'd never get to see her or hold her again. Fast forward, it's 9:00. I'm laying on the couch in the hospital and I say, "God, where's your love in all this? Because I don't see it. I'm not bitter or angry at you because I know you did not cause this. I don't buy into the fact that you needed another angel in heaven. I believe that there is an enemy who comes to steal, kill, and destroy, and he did. So God, where's your love in all this?" And I got a flashback to that moment of handing my daughter's body over. That pain, that desperation, the anxiety, life itself being sucked right out of me. And I said, "God, I don't get it. Why show me this when I asked for your love?" And he said, "Evan, because that is exactly how I feel anytime any of my children live a life without ever knowing my love." And in that moment, not saying I became supreme being, but I became like God in understanding his hurt in a way that I'd never been able to experience before. And then out of my brokenness, I say, "God, why couldn't we just not have gotten pregnant?" Because I'm going to be honest, we started with male contraception. And then I was like, "Yeah, this ain't fun." Got rid of that. And then we got pregnant. So God, why couldn't we have just skipped the pregnancy? And I felt him say, "Evan, because her eternal plan and her eternal purpose far outweighs any hurt, pain, or suffering that you'll ever experience." And as this hurt and broken father, I said, "Well, what is she doing in heaven as a job or vocation or whatever? Because it must be amazing." And it's one of those slap your forehead moments because you already know the answer. He goes, "Her eternal plan and her eternal purpose is for her to dwell with me and me to dwell with her. That is her eternal plan and purpose." And it's the same reason why I created Adam and Eve and humanity, knowing I'd still have to send my son, Jesus, because the eternal plan and purpose for the creation far outweighs any hurt, pain, or suffering of why I would send Jesus to die. And in that moment, I understood a little bit more the depths of salvation, the depths of heaven and the reality of it. And I've gone through these moments of increase, of knowledge, increase, of depthness. But it was in that moment that my life changed. Because I knew the pain of a father's heart whose child would never get to experience his love. And out of that is why I do everything that I do, so that I can live out the heart of God by loving others back to life. And I try to do that whether we talk about finances or personal growth or wholeness or politics. And it's all done to bring the creation and the creator together. So that's my story.
You know that scripture, all things work together for good for those that love God and called according to his purposes. And, it's easy to, I've read the Bible 24, 25 times cover to cover. I've got Greek and Hebrew tattooed all over my body because I've dug into the word to want to know the meaning behind things so that I really understand what is being said, because I couldn't understand how all these things could work together for good for him or for me.
Right.
And I do now. I see it now. I will never go through what you went through, and I'm so sorry to hear that. But I'm also grateful just for God opening your eyes and giving you to give you the ability to see from his perspective and to feel that is a gift from him. And I believe and agree with everything you're saying. And I think a good message for everybody listening is, like you said, why do bad things happen to good people, and why do good things happen to bad people? Well, we don't have the answers to everything, and you have to be okay with not having the answers to everything in life.
Right.
But I think the most important question that we can ask, the most important question we can ask, far above anything else, is whatever your question is, ask the God of the universe.
Yeah.
If you want to know why, ask him. If you can't, you're not going to hear from him audibly. I doubt it. But I do know that he's going to answer. And now,
can I share a quick story?
Yeah, please do.
I love what you're saying. There was a girl named Emily, and she was going through some pretty hard stuff. She was young. She left her home at like 16, and she got awarded custody of herself to become an early legal adult. Her parents were divorced. Her father was going through like dementia or something like that. And anyway, she posed this question to God: if you're real, I'm going to give you 1 year to prove yourself to me that you're real. My wife has to go to work in Oklahoma City, and she was going to be there overnight. And just last minute, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to come with you. I can, because, of what I do. So I decided to go. And then like that night we ate at this Italian restaurant. And as I'm walking in, I hear the word Emily in my head. And I said, set me in Emily's section. I said, oh, do you know Emily? I said, no. I'm like, well, Emily's not here right now. Oh, wait, she did. She just got here. Yeah, we'll put you in her section. We sat down in Emily's section. She's serving us. I said, Emily, your heart hurts because of a man in your life. And I don't know what's going on, but God does. And he sees your heart, and he wants to heal it. She broke down crying. She told me the whole story. And then she goes, but you don't understand. She goes, I gave God 1 year to prove himself that he's real and that he loves me. Today is 365 days later.
No way. No way. I mean, wow.
Yeah. So here's two things. Wow. One, how many people disobeyed God before me? Because you think God just waited for Evan Herrman to get there? No. He had been reaching out to her all along. How many people was God wanting to use and they disobeyed? I lived 2 hours away from this girl. But how much had to be so led by God to get me there? And then be sensitive to his voice. You know how weird that is, saying, hey, set me in Emily's section, when you have no idea who Emily is, but you hear the name in your head? So I say all that to say God reaches out to people through other people. And if you call on God, he will answer. He might use an Evan Herrman. He might use a TV show. There was one time I was really struggling with where to go to college. And I, reached out to my pastor's son-in-law, who was a new Christian himself. And he's like, dude, I don't know anything spiritual. Like, I'm a new Christian. Just come over. We'll watch Creflo Dollar or something.
I used to go to his church.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So we watched Creflo Dollar. And then at the end of his, it was a really good message. I don't remember what it was about. At the end of the program, there was an advertisement for college, for Oral Roberts University. And he's like, dude, this is where you're praying about trying to go. And I was just like, all right, this is it. This is God. That was the sign. God will absolutely reach out to you. It may not be in the way or the manner or the time that you want. But if you're open to him and you're open to truth, he will answer.
Yes, he will. Yes, he will. Yes, he will. And when he does it, what's interesting about the way he works is that, that experience that you had obviously had a huge impact on you, had a huge impact on Emily. And, some people might hear that story and, yeah. So you have voices in your head and you got lucky, or let's say you say
if it was just a one time, then yeah, you could call it luck, but it happens all the time now.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm excited to hear that. And you said it can happen through watching a TV show. It can happen through anything.
Yeah.
It can happen through anything, any innocuous, seemingly insignificant thing. It could be it could be anything.
Dude, okay.
And that's the thing about it is that when God answers you, it's going to blow your mind. But you know what? It may not seem like any big deal to somebody else. So that's what I love about him.
Here's another story. You ready for this? I wanted a picture of what my daughter would look like at around 6-7 years of age. The one that passed away as a premature stillborn. And I reached out to this guy who I knew, him and I have completely different beliefs in sexuality and spirituality. But I reached out to him because I knew he was a good artist. And I said, hey, here's what happened in our life. And I really want a picture of what I think my daughter would look like. Here's a picture of my wife. Here's a picture of myself. These are the attributes from her, of my wife, that I felt like my daughter has. Here's the attributes that I have. Would you please be willing to draw a picture? And he did. And it's very, I think that's what my daughter looks like. But in the photo, in the drawing that he did, he added 2 fake green leaves. And I was really disappointed when I saw them, because I just felt like it kind of took away from how beautiful of a drawing he did of her. And it upset me for a while, even though I was really grateful for the drawing. And he did it for free, other than like the shipping and framing and stuff. I didn't say anything about the leaves, but I didn't want to take it apart either, to take the leaves out, because I didn't want to ruin the photo. I think like 6 months later, we watched a movie. I can't remember the actor who was in it, but the actress was Jennifer Gardner, and her husband couldn't have children. And so what they did in order to grieve that is they made a fictitious child, and they put stuff in a shoebox of their fictitious child and buried it as a burial. And then it rained and stormed, and then out from that spot came a 10, 11-year-old boy in the movie. But the thing is he had leaves all down his legs, and he was only going to be there for a season. And during fall, when the leaves started falling off, the last leaf is when he'd go back to the ground. And so his parents only got to experience him for a season. And towards the end of his life, as the leaves were falling off and he only had a little bit of leaves left, he started giving them to specific people so that they could remember him by, as a way of saying thank you. And each one he had a different message. But the last leaf he gave to his parents. And he said, even though I was only able to be with you for a short time, you're the best parents I could have ever had. And he gave them his last leaf before he died, and then went back into the ground. And then when I saw that leaf, when I remembered that movie and that quote and looked at the picture, that was the message. That even though we only got to carry her for about 5 months, that we were the best parents that she could have ever asked for. That was the message that God gave us from her. And that leaf in the photo took a whole new meaning. And God used someone who I would have never expected. And I have to be open to that too.
Yeah. I like how he put it in your life before you knew about the meaning. And I also like how you shared that you struggled with, I didn't really like that very much, but I didn't say anything. And obviously, your artist friend had no, there was no, he didn't know. He was being an artist, right?
I'll get even more crazier, okay? I was walking to Starbucks one day around 2010, 2011, and I heard God say, your first child's going to be a boy. I want you to give him the meaning of the name healer because he's going to heal your definition of father. And I had no idea what that meant. So the first time we're pregnant, I'm like, it's a boy, it's a boy, it's a boy, it's a boy. It's a girl. Nope, I missed God. That's not true. And it wasn't until we got pregnant again that I realized the magnitude of what he was saying. Because we didn't know if we'd be able to have kids. We didn't know why she died. And it took us like 3 years to get pregnant after that too. And I just remember even before losing her, 3 years before losing her, God gave me a promise in advance to hold on to. And that promise in advance took 6 years to fulfill. From the time he gave that. But he showed me his love before I'd even have to go through hurt or pain. As a way of just knowing that he was there with me all along.
Evan, I would, if you're open to it, man, I would love to have you come back and do like an episode 2, and not too far down the road. I would love to do that. It's been so nice getting to know you, and there's a lot of really good stuff in this episode, and I would love to do it some more, and let's do that. I would love to do that.
Perfect.
But with that, I do want to thank you, Evan, for coming on the show. I'm grateful for that. I'm a firm believer in everything that happens in our lives happens for a reason. And no matter how much it may not look like it's significant, everything is significant. My life is a little bit changed and a little bit better today just from listening to you and listening to your stories. And you're my kind of guy. I want to talk about reality. And for me, reality is, we were born for a purpose. God is real. What are we supposed to do with ourselves? And that is to fall in love with him, to know him, and to bring him glory. And those are 3 really big statements that if you don't, people need to hear it more. And they need to hear real life examples like you've shared with us, because it's that's what touches the hearts of people, is our stories, our testimonies. And I just really appreciate you coming on the show. I want to thank you, and I look forward to doing it again very soon.
Likewise. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it and appreciate being here and just who you are as a person.